$20 million high school campus. I'm now working on a $360 million project, mixed use in Nevada, with 2 million square feet of retail. It has parking structure and fireproof steel frame high-rise office space also. Altogether, over 10,000 tons of steel framing. Now, we have a website at ae911truth.org. On it, you'll see that there are over 200 architects and engineers that I represent that are demanding a real investigation, and they need your help to spread the word to every architect and engineer in the United States. After you become convinced, and we'll see the show of hands at the end of those who have, those of you who have see it as we do. But the point of this is that on the right you can see a list of the evidence in short view. You can also see several articles that are of great interest, and you can step through the PowerPoint presentation much slower at your own pace and actually read the text, which I'll be flying through. And you can also watch the DVD. We call it How the Towers Fell. The DVD itself is for sale also in the back after the presentation, and it is called 9/11 Blueprint for Truth, the Architecture of Construction. There's a lot of technical articles on this website which will aid you in your own research. We don't ask you to believe us, we ask you to do your own research. And the internet is a great way to do some very scientific research with some very credible scientists, engineers, architects, and others. So these are a few of those who have signed on to our website demanding a new investigation. And most recently, this poll in 2007, Zogby poll, finds that 51% of Americans want Congress to probe the Bush-Cheney administration, should we call it the Cheney administration, regarding the 9/11 attacks. 110 senior military intelligence service, law enforcement, and government officials want a new investigation. 190 9/11 survivors and family members. 160 distinguished professors. 100 entertainment and media professionals. You can follow the links and find out who they all are, calling for a new probe. Well, the American people were subjected to repeated and shocking attacks on 9/11, killing thousands of us. And the 5-year since has given us enough time to objectively step out and look at the relatively new evidence and get out of this hypnotic trance that we were really put into and become more objective. So let's take our first step in that direction by looking at the flights, the impact, the collapse, and the myth in this short clip from 9/11 Mysteries.
September 11, we learned that 4 passenger planes were hijacked and taken radically off course. Within an hour, 2 of the planes had flown into the enormous steel towers of the World Trade Center, creating fires and eventually toppling them. Dazed by the news, the American public soon believed the fires in the towers had burned so hot they caused the steel frames of the buildings to give way. A myth developed, fed by official sources through the media to a bewildered audience. Elements of the myth. The impact of the airplanes, gallons of burning jet fuel, steel melting, the buildings failing and suddenly imploding. In a mere 10 seconds, 110 stories hurtled earthward, pulverizing into dust. Right from the start, on the street itself, the official story was born.
Come out of nowhere and just screamed right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
He's up, now, how did he get so smart? Well, buildings are destroyed by a number of forces, and fortunately for our research, they have very different and very identifiable characteristics. For instance, buildings which are destroyed by fire are quite different than those which are destroyed by controlled demolition. That is to say, the These forces are different. And fires, by their nature, tend to creep from place to place as they burn out an area of, as the fuel burns out, and they look for fresh sources of fuel, leaving the burned out area to cool. So when collapses do occur, and by the way, they've never occurred in a steel frame high-rise building, as you'll see examples of, but say in a wood building, they tend to fall asymmetrically over toward the area that is injured most by the fire. Again, an organic process. They have large, visible deformations. So these buildings were destroyed by earthquakes. Their mass tends to hang together, structural mass. It doesn't disintegrate to dust or into their individual structural components. You can still see that it's basically a building. These buildings were destroyed by explosions. Note the thick, dense, billowing, and enormous dust clouds, shooting streamers and flashes of light. Sounds of explosions, of course, are heard. We'll be looking for these elements in all three of the World Trade Center. This one on the lower right is not the World Trade Center North Tower, but we'll be taking a close examination to see comparisons. Now let's take a look at controlled demolitions, because controlled demolitions are the most common method to use to destroy high-rise buildings because they're extremely efficient. We have hundreds of examples from all across the country to make our comparison because it is the most efficient way. This is what a high-rise building looks like when it's being demolished with explosives. Typically, a tall building is demolished by placing thousands of cutter charges adjacent to the columns and beams throughout the building, and then detonating them in a very precise order. Starting with the interior structures and then progressing outward, and then progressing synchronistically timed floor by floor, starting from the bottom and destroying the rest of the floors on the way up. Destroying the interior columns allows the unsupported weight to pull the exterior inward, and allows gravity to be harnessed to do much of the destruction when we start from the bottom up. The result is an implosion into a consolidated rubble pile where the building is broken up and ready for loading and shipment into its individual structural elements. Now, this is a feat that only a handful of companies in the United States can accomplish, and until 9/11, fire has never accomplished. Let's take a look at the characteristic features. And this is on your handout, by the way, and you can follow all the way through this presentation, these particular elements. We have direct evidence of explosives in controlled demolitions, starting with sounds produced by explosions, a rapid onset of destruction at the base, dust clouds, which are thick, billowing, and enormous. Now, these are typical controlled demolitions. Evidence of cutter charges, chemical evidence. Squids, explosive cutting charges visible at the upper floors. Demolition waves that remove the column support floor by floor. And total collapse where the steel skeleton is broken up and ready for shipment. This all results in a straight down symmetrical collapse into its own footprint at free fall speed. Very important. And none of these characteristics, of course, are characteristics of destruction by fire. And that is extremely important. We have government documentation, because these are planned months in advance, of course, with very critical review by building jurisdictions, building departments. We have foreknowledge of the collapse, of course. Expert corroboration, yeah, that's a controlled demolition, the experts tell us. So let's see if there isn't any comparison that we can do to Building 7. So, like our model in front of you, this diagram shows that Building 7 is a 47-story skyscraper, almost half the height of the Twin Towers. Now, it would be easily the highest building in 33 of our states. It's only dwarfed being next to what was the two highest buildings in the world in 1976. So it was a football field away from the North Tower, and you can see it over here on the right. After the North Tower had already collapsed, here is Building 7, still standing, and it did not collapse until 5:20 in the afternoon, the two Twin Towers having gone down in the morning. It was never hit by an airplane.